Good afternoon, everyone. We are back from recess. It is now 2:05 p.m. I'd like to remind Lieutenant Governor Palacios that you're still under oath, and we will continue with the questionings. First one, did you have lunch with Governor Torres?
No.
No need to answer. Okay, we will continue with the questioning and the examination of expenditures of Governor Ralph D. Leon Guerrero Torres and Mrs. Diane Tadella Torres. And at this time, we would like to start off by recognizing Representative Tina Sablon.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome back, Lieutenant Governor. So, Chair and colleagues and Lieutenant Governor, this next line of questioning deals with the Governor's expedition to the Northern Islands last summer. In the summer of 2020, in the first few months of the COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Torres went on an expedition to the Northern Islands with Mr. Robert Arrington of the YouTube show Deer Meat for Dinner, along with family members and crew associated with Mr. Arrington, as well as family members and friends of Governor Torres. Significant government resources were used for this trip, including public funds, supplies, fuel, and assets from the Marianas Visitors Authority, the Department of Public Safety, including vessels and officers, the Northern Islands Mayor's Office, the Department of Lands and Natural Resources, including the Curita vessel, and Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Lieutenant Governor, were you part of the decision-making to utilize government resources for this trip?
No.
So the governor did not discuss with you his plans at the time?
Yes, it did. But, you know, at the time I expressed my concern. I also expressed my support for that program. And the reason why I was very concerned is the pandemic was just starting to rage. We had closed down our tourism. After you explained the project to me, I believe I had shared my thoughts that, hey, this is a good project for MBA. Unfortunately, I think it's the wrong time. It's absolutely the wrong time. And maybe we should wait and have a more clearer understanding of what the project will entail. There's no question that Mr. Harrington has a wide viewership on YouTube, and that definitely could help. There was also an individual that lives on Saipan who goes on an adventure by himself to the Northern Islands and takes a lot of good pictures. That certainly could be a niche in tourism, in adventure tourism, ecotourism, but I believe at the time, and still believe today, that the timing was really bad. Now, as far as the resources, that's why when you don't plan properly, you end up spending more resources than you really need. But who am I to say? I'm not an adventurist. I'm not a hunter, and I don't go up to the Northern Islands to do those things. I've been up there many times. I've done recreational fishing. So yeah, and the resources that we used up there is fairly high. The list of resources. So.
And when you say that it was bad timing, could you just explain that more? Bad timing because why?
Because the COVID was just raging. We were closing down our tourism. Mm-hmm. And we needed as much resources as we can get to address this issue right in front of us. And by no means am I understating the value of Mr. Arrington's potential exposure for the Northern Mariana Islands. But Personally, I thought at the time that, hey, this is probably not the right time. Maybe we should wait when things clear up. Uh, we know. I mean, look, today we haven't seen the positive results that we had anticipated,
Mhm.
and probably will not, given the travel restrictions that many countries have, and also we have.
Thank you. And when you expressed your concerns about the timing and the intensive use of government resources for this trip, what was the governor's response?
Yeah, it was pretty much a done deal, wasn't? Says, yeah, understand. He understands, but I think because the guy was already on his way in, we couldn't wait.
I see. Thank you. Cam, are you able to pull up one of those sample videos? Lieutenant Governor, did you watch any of the Deer Meat for Dinner videos from that trip?
Some.
Okay, so here's an example from showing the release of deer, sandbar deer, transported from Saipan to Pagan, and then released. Were you aware that sandbar deer would be transported and released on Pagan in June of 2020?
No,
You were not aware that would
I
happen.
I found out after they're ready to go north that it was going to be released, and I called the secretary of the LNR and I said, are you sure that we are in compliance? And he says yes. So yeah, I mean, hey,
And when you say you asked if the Secretary of DLNR was sure that we were in compliance with what?
with the regulations on introduction of species to areas that have not have this same species. We've never had deer in the northern islands. There is a prohibition and a restriction on introducing species into areas where they're not indigenous. So yeah, I got rolled over, to put
Okay.
it to put it bluntly.
And what was the Secretary's response when you raised those concerns about compliance?
He said it's okay. It was okay, you know. So
Were you aware at the
certainly
time?
he was the secretary of DLNR, and I'm not in a position to tell him that, hey, you're
Mhm.
wrong.
Were you aware at the time? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I wasn't aware that there was any changes in law, in statute, or regulations that amended that particular. So I asked, are you sure about this? Yeah, boss, it's okay. It'll be okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Thank you. And at the time, were you aware that Title II, Section 5803 of the Commonwealth Code explicitly prohibits the release of captive deer into the wild?
Yes, that was what I was referring to the secretary at the time.
Okay.
And again, I asked him if, hey, has there been any change in statute, or has that regulation been amended? Or statute, I think it was a
The
statute.
statute, right. And were you aware that hunting and fishing occurred? Are you aware that hunting and fishing occurred in constitutionally protected conservation areas during this trip?
Not hunting. Fishing is allowed in the monuments
Mhm.
if it's for recreational purposes.
Are you aware that the governor received a permit to bring back 40 species of coconut crabs from the northern islands, including the island of Guguan, which is a constitutionally protected conservation area where hunting is prohibited?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Are you aware that open burning occurred on the beach on Pagan during this trip?
I saw that on the video.
What was your reaction?
Uh, well, the mayor was there, and you're looking at it uh, in a way, kind of made sense with me because there's a lot of centipedes there, and perhaps if that control, it was a control burn. The area where it was going to be burned was just going to be where they're going to be camping. Uh, of course, there's always that concern because there's no running water, and if that fire had gotten out of control, then we would have been trouble.
Right.
So
Are you aware that fuel was stored on the ground without containment?
no,
So, as a former DLNR secretary with 20 years of service at Lands and Natural Resources, what was your take of the activities that occurred during this expedition?
there was a lot of concern. I was very concerned about the lack of compliance in some instances. But hey, the President Secretary said it's okay, and things will be fine. And luckily, uh, nothing bad happened. Fortunately, nothing bad happened.
As a former DLNR secretary, would you have ever authorized these activities?
If we were going to authorize it, we would have done a proper planning to ensure that any eventualities could be addressed. How we were going to do that? Uh, if it was on another island, I'd be very concerned. But Pagang had periodic inhabitants. So there's areas there that we could do this. But again, the train was moving on this, and
Does a DLNR secretary have authority to issue permits that violate CNMI law?
no, of course not. Of course not.
Now, you said it's fortunate that nothing bad happened, but during the governor's expedition to the Northern Islands, a young man drowned on Saipan and his body was never found, and a boat sank on Alamagan. What can you say about the use of federally funded search and rescue vessels and boating safety officers to support the governor's expedition to the Northern Islands that diverted precious personnel and resources from actual search and rescue operations?
That's exactly what I mean. When you're gonna have these expeditions, we need to plan it holistically, because if you're gonna require all search and rescue vessels to be up in the Northern Islands, what that means is you're not gonna have any present in Saipan, Tinian, or Rhoda if something should happen, and that's exactly what happened. I think the word unfortunate is an understatement. That's why I said that I mean, both boats shouldn't have gone up there. I cannot speak to the vessel that sank in Alamagang because I don't have any information on that. And fortunately, those two gentlemen who were on the boat were safe.
But it's fair to say, in your view, that there could have been and should have been better planning for this trip.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
And assets have to be appropriated or assigned appropriately. Like I said, if this is where the populations are, and and you have all the boating safety vessels up in the northern islands and none here, and something happens here, it's going to be a very tragic situation. So, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Thank you. I yield at this time for this line of questioning, Madam Chair, if you or other members have questions.
Are there any questions from the members? If there are none, Representative Tina Sablan, you may continue.
Thank you, Chair. So our next line of questioning deals with utilities and public expenditures for the governor's utilities, specifically at his private residence. So Chair and colleagues and Lieutenant Governor, CNMI law currently allows for top public officials, including yourself and the governor, to avail of a government residence. You and Governor Torres, like your predecessors, have opted to stay instead in your own private homes. We are aware that finance has made it a practice to authorize the payment of utilities at the private residences of the governor and lieutenant governor when they do not stay in official government residences. Now, the records we have reviewed show that Governor Torres has incurred tens of thousands of dollars in utilities at his own private residence. And for just a 3-year period between November 2018, so right after Super Typhoon Yutu, and May 2021, the records show approximately $100,000 altogether. His monthly bills for power and water routinely have exceeded anywhere from $1,000 a month to as high as $3,000, $4,000, $6,000, and even $16,000, approximately $16,000 for 1 month. It is our understanding that during the period in review, Governor Torres had a commercial piggery operating on his private estate, one of the largest, if not the largest, on the island. Lieutenant Governor, have you seen this piggery?
Yes.
And it appears from the records that taxpayers may have been paying the power and water costs associated with that piggery on the governor's estate. Do you know anything about piggeries and how much water they consume?
I don't know much about piggeries, but I know that they consume a lot of water for wash down. So what was the next question?
Well, we can pull up some of the exhibits. Cam, would you please pull up the CUC bills for Governor Torres for the periods March to April 2019? We'll start with that. So this bill for March to April 2019 shows water usage of approximately 264,000 gallons for total water costs of more than $15,000, $15,309.52 to be exact. That's for 1 month. Our next exhibit, Cam, if you would please pull up May to June 2019. So this bill appears to show water usage of approximately 233 gallons of water, 233,000 gallons of water for a total water service charge of $13,535.50. And Cam, for the next one, July to August 2019. Thank you. This bill shows water usage of approximately 186,000 gallons of water for a total water service charge of about $10,800, $10,798.06. Lieutenant Governor, does this water usage seem excessive to you?
Yes.
Thank you. And if we could also pull up the next exhibit, Cam. This is a request for reimbursement of March 14, 2019. So this is one of the earlier exhibits submitted for the record during a previous hearing, and we looked at this reimbursement request memo for Governor Torres, again dated March 2019, covering the 5-month period after Super Typhoon Yutu from October 2018 to February 2019. So this is at a time, as you know, Lieutenant Governor, when so many homes on Saipan and Tinian lacked power and running water. The total reimbursement amount for that period was $6,630.90. Governor Torres paid that bill on March 13, 2019, and immediately sought reimbursement the very next day on March 14, 2019. Could we skip to the receipt, please? The receipt that is attached to the memo shows the name on the receipt, Ralph De Leon Guerrero Torres, his account number, and that $6,700 was paid in cash. Change was given back in the amount of $69.10. Lieutenant Governor, does the payment of that bill by the governor in such a large amount of cash strike you as unusual?
Yes.
Have you ever paid your own CUC bill or any bill in such large sums of cash?
Not in my wildest dream. No.
Thank you. I yield at this time for other members, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Sablan. At this time, okay, I'll recognize Representative Ed Probst before we move on.
Thank you. Just a quick note, I just wanted to state for the record that the staggering amounts of water that were consumed for those months that were for a company that was a piggery that was profiting, yet I want to emphasize the fact that taxpayers are paying for this, and it is not just unfair, the amount that was spent on this. If you look at the comparison to the largest public school on island of their water usage for an entire year, they had Mariners High School, one entire year, I'm just looking at the records right now, was about $16,367. So I just want to show how an entire school couldn't even use that much, but yet this humongous piggery could, and they didn't even question it. Like, it was totally acceptable. I just had to make that comment, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Probst. At this time, we will move on to Representative Donald Mangonia.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon again, Lieutenant Governor. My questions are just to go off of some of the CUC questions that Rep. Sablan had brought up. Lieutenant Governor, are you aware that, like Governor Torres, you also have your CUC bills at your private residence paid by the government?
Yes.
Do you know what the payment arrangement is for your utility bills?
You want to repeat the question?
Do you know what the arrangement is in regards to how your utility bills are paid for?
Yes. I gave my monthly utility bills to the SAA and see process payments to CUC.
Okay, and do you also sometimes pay your bill and then get reimbursed, or
No.
so you
Never
just
done that.
give the bill directly to
Yes.
SAA? Lieutenant Governor, how many CUC accounts do you currently have? Do you know what your average monthly power usage is?
It runs.
Monthly power usage is?
It runs somewhere within $700 to $900 a month.
Just for power.
No, water and power.
Do you know what the difference is between, or what your power charge would be out of the 700 to 900?
Surprisingly, power is cheaper than water. Probably 30% would be power, and 70%, 60 to 70% would be water.
Okay. Do you have a farm or a piggery at your residence?
No.
Have you ever caused the government to pay for CUC accounts that are in the names of individuals other than yourself, such as a family member?
No, sir.
And so earlier you said that you lived in a family compound with other relatives nearby, correct?
Yes.
So does the government pay for their utilities?
No.
have you ever caused the government to pay for any commercial enterprise at your private residence?
Utilities?
Yes.
No.
Would you ever cause the government to pay for such utility expenses associated with your own private residence?
No. Absolutely not.
All right. And so, would you think that a monthly utility bill ranging between 5 to 15,000 for power and water is excessive for a private residence?
Yes, but
Do you think a water usage exceeding 185,000 gallons is excessive?
yes.
Yeah. Now, the average cinema resident would never be able to afford monthly CUC bills in the amounts that Governor Torres, has had taxpayers pay for him, and the average cinema resident, would have their utilities disconnected or lose their deposits for failing to pay their bills. Would you agree?
Yes.
And would you consider it an abuse of office to rack up excessive power and water usage, knowing that the cinema taxpayers will be footing that bill?
On the face, yes, absolutely. Over 100,000 gallons of water per month is extremely excessive, and to expect the public to pay for that is I don't know what else to say. It's crazy. It's
All right. Understood. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. Chair, are you?
Thank you, Representative Manglonia. We will move along. Recognize Representative Tina Sablan.
Thank you. I just have a follow-up question on the payment arrangements that you have with the SAA and CUC. So, do you have any idea why the governor would choose to pay on a reimbursement basis sometimes? Because he has the same option, right, of giving his bills
Yeah.
to the SAA.
yeah, absolutely. That I'm surprised that has happened. That is actually the procedure that we have, where the SAA would submit a request for payment to CUC on the account number of our residences, and that gets paid. That's the procedure. That's the protocol. I wasn't aware that he would pay on his own and get reimbursed. No, I wasn't.
And to be clear, you yourself have never done that,
No,
paid on a reimbursement basis?
no.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Sablan. I recognize Representative Ed Probst.
Thank you. Since we're on the topic of CUC, Lieutenant Governor, do you have a generator at your home?
Yes,
Okay. When it breaks down, do you call CUC and have them come down in the day and fix your generator?
no, I don't.
Have you ever done that?
No, the generator is never broken down.
Okay. Out of curiosity, since you haven't done that, would you consider that an acceptable option to utilize CUC manpower?
Yeah, there are companies that maintain generators on Saipan, residential generators. So those are options that we need to take a look at. And I've had my private generators, of course, maintained and repaired by individual companies,
Private companies.
private companies.
Do you pay for that expense?
Yes.
Do you submit it for reimbursement?
No.
Okay. If your generator needed new batteries, do you think it would be acceptable for CUC to put together a purchase order and buy you brand new batteries for your generator? Or would you pay for that yourself?
I either pay for that myself or request through a purchase order to pay for it out of my account.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Probst. At this time, we will move forward. And I now recognize Representative Vicente Camacho.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome back, Lieutenant Governor. I'm not going to ask any questions about CEC because my bills is becoming governor's bill too. It's getting very expensive. So my first question, Lieutenant Governor, is does Ms. Diane Tudela Torres attend cabinet meetings?
Not that I can recall. Not that I remember her ever attending a cabinet.
Okay, thank you. Do you know why the governor would request or authorize the First Lady's travel to attend cabinet meetings?
No,
Thank you. Does your spouse attend cabinet meetings?
no, I don't think she would want to either.
Right on. Were you involved in any way in the governor's decision to hire impeachment attorneys out of Washington, D.C.?
No,
Thank you. Do you know if the Attorney General authorized the governor to hire these impeachment attorneys to represent him?
that's what I heard. Again, yeah, I mean, I heard that he did authorize for him to get private attorneys.
All right, thank you for that. Given everything you know from these hearings, from public records, and in your own experience and observations as Lieutenant Governor, in your view, is Governor Torres misusing public funds?
What was that operative word there?
I'll repeat the questions. Given everything you know from the hearings, from public records, and in your own experience and observations as Lieutenant Governor, in your view, is Governor Torres misusing public funds?
It would appear to be. Whether he is, I'm not going to pass judgment. Seriously, I mean, just on the type of informations that are coming out from the records from finance, it points that way. But maybe one of these days, as he had alluded in the past, that he would come to this chamber and clarify everything. But until that day comes, the dark cloud still lingers over these expenditures.
Okay. Thank you for that. One last question. Given the pattern of lavish expenses that are now part of the public record, including but not limited to first-class travel, extravagant reimbursements, the misuse of government vessels, public safety personnel, and other government resources, and excessive utility usage, in your view, is Governor Torres abusing his office?
He may be abusing some of the regulations and the law. Whether or not he's consciously doing it, it's your points that way, Congressman. My honest opinion. You know, these records are executive branch records that you folks have. This body had acquired through an Open Government Act, and the records speaks for themselves. You, as members of this committee, would have to be certain that. Is that fair enough?
Fair enough, sir.
Okay.
I yield for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Camacho. I recognize Representative Ed Probst.
Just some clarifying questions. Lieutenant Governor, these attorneys out of Washington, D.C., I heard they're pretty expensive. We've had a lot of our constituents ask several of us how this will be paid, who will pay for it. Lieutenant Governor, do you know how these attorneys will be paid?
No, to be honest with you, and I hope that it's not going to be paid out of the public funds. But hey, strange things have happened.
Thank you.
But there were other presidents. In the case of former Governor Tenorio, who was sued in court. He was sued and he availed of a private attorney, and the government paid for that attorney because he was acting in his official capacity. He was being sued as
And I ask this because I know the rounds of politics and the spin city that we are often so used to with the political climate and turmoil. But I just find it odd that that we have many attorneys available at that the governor could utilize, and he chooses a DC attorney that certainly will be exorbitant costs. He also has Gil Burnbridge as his attorney, as his counsel right now, and we have been accused of, when we have talked about hiring an additional legal counsel to assist us with our investigation. Yet we see many government agencies, including the governor, utilizing private attorneys. I find that there's a little bit of hypocrisy there, and especially given the amount that certainly would be paid. Based on your dealings in the past with with attorneys and counsels, don't you think that these DC-based attorneys would be much higher in terms of their expense than a local attorney?
I would think so.
Thank you. I also would like to ask a question, something that has come up from earlier today on one of the exhibits. Cam, if you could pull up exhibit 33. Okay, first let's go so this list that we looked at earlier, I was looking at this list, and one of the lists that's really interesting is, I think there's Black Micro, and on that, can you go, scroll back to the top of the list, and right there, could you pull in a little bit so we could, you see Black Micro on that? Go back to the top of the list, and right there, could you pull in a little bit so we could, you see Black Micro on that list? Scroll down. Scroll down. Okay. Black Micro is listed, right? So if we could scroll down to the receipt, yeah. Okay. Black Micro is listed, right? So if we could scroll down to the receipt, yeah. For Black Micro. Is that the Black Micro? Okay, can we go for the receipt? Can you zoom in a little bit? Now this is a receipt. Pull in a little bit more so we can just look at some of the good stuff here. We have Wagyu beef, and we have sauteed foie gras. Has anybody tried foie gras? I haven't either. I heard it's really good. And you have a Wagyu beef seafood combo. You have a Wagyu sirloin, and you have a Sauvignon Blanc. Hey, the good news is there was a 20% discount VIP. Okay, so the taxpayers got a little discount. So total, if we scroll down a little bit, total was $281.60. And let's go further down. And the justification here, meeting with Black Micro reps. Um, Lieutenant Governor, do you know who Black Micro is?
I'm assuming it's the construction company.
It's a construction firm. Now, what I find interesting, and this is with so many questionable reimbursements, is Black Micro is a construction company that obviously has done business here with the government. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. They've done business with many government contracts, I'm sure, as has others. Do you find it a little bit odd that the governor would be taking out for a fine dinner that includes foie gras, wagyu, and other things, is treating Black Micro representatives, a construction firm, for a meeting? I ask this because they are soliciting contracts with the government. In your experience, have you ever taken out a construction firm for a meeting and paid for a lavish dinner like that?
No, not to the last question, no.
Okay. I just, again, when I look at this, it once again is of many questionable reimbursements that we still have yet to hear an actual justification and the concerns of this, because this is in the best interests, as always, as it is signed, in the best interests of the Commonwealth. And I cannot, for all the life in me, understand how a governor, a sitting governor, treating a construction firm for a lavish dinner is going to somehow benefit the Commonwealth. And also, I question the fact that it calls into suspect with other construction companies. Does this give this construction company some sort of advantage by having a unique fine dining experience with the governor?
I understand what you're asking,
Yes.
but
Go ahead. Go ahead.
your guess is as good as mine.
Thank you. I guess that is what you mentioned earlier, that all the more reason why the governor hopefully will come in and answer these questions truthfully under oath and explain this and literally hundreds of other questionable reimbursements that many of us have asked repeatedly. Again, I can't think of what reason would be so important for a sitting governor to take out a construction firm, representatives from that firm, and treat them to a lavish dinner. To what benefit does the Commonwealth receive eating foie gras, wagyu beef, and sipping off of Sauvignon Blanc? These are the, I say that pretty well. These are the questions that many of us hope to have answered, to have answered soon. Okay. Thank you.
Do
And-
any of the other members have any questions? Recognize Representative Tina Sablan.
I actually do have a question. The foie gras reference prompted me to look up another receipt that I'd like to ask the Lieutenant Governor about. And Cam, would you please, I just forwarded that to you. Could you please bring that up? And I'd like to submit this as an exhibit as well. So this would be exhibit number 53. 53. Okay, thank you. Now, Lieutenant Governor, this request for reimbursement, it's on the screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
It's dated May 5th, 2017. It's for a single meal hosting of Mr. Corey Lewandowski and PSDs that occurred in April 4th, 2017 at the Bourbon Steak Restaurant. Total amount for the reimbursement was $1,823.90. It was signed by Governor Ralph Torres. If you could please scroll down. Submitted to then Secretary Larissa Larson, and he received reimbursement. Now the receipt, if we could go to the receipt, again, we see shrimp cocktail, burrata, the A5 trio, which I understand included Wagyu steak, bison tomahawk, all kinds of, there's ribeye steak, looks like maybe 7 of those. It was a feast, and the purpose was to host Mr. Corey Lewandowski, who was then, he was associated, as you may know, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, with the former President Trump campaign. He's a lobbyist with Avenue Strategies. Do you have any information about this meeting and what public purpose it may have served?
No, I don't.
All right, do you know Mr. Lewandowski?
I've heard of him, read about him, but I don't know.
Okay, and what do you know about him?
He was a lobbyist.
Was he a lobbyist
And-
for the Commonwealth?
I don't believe so.
Okay, but you know him as a Republican lobbyist.
Yes,
Okay.
he was in the Trump administration, I believe.
Right.
When
Okay. And you're not aware of any public purpose that may have been served by this hosting that cost the Commonwealth taxpayers in one single sitting $1,823.90.
no, again, the governor would have to answer that question.
Thank you. I yield, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Sablan. I recognize Representative Vicente Camacho.
Thank you, Chair. One last question. As the sitting Lieutenant Governor, do you or have you ever given advice to the governor as to the state of the cinema, especially the sentiment of the people regarding the governor's leadership and his presumed criminal activities?
Have I ever given him advice?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but not necessarily in that direct. Snippets of advice. We need to be very careful, especially in those days right after the super typhoon, and in those days when the economy wasn't doing so well, and we were having to make very, very difficult and even painful decisions on how we're going to cut expenditures and costs of our government. And so, a lot of times I share my thoughts that we need to really buckle down, tighten up every expenditure, whether it's coming from departments, autonomous agencies, even federal grantees. Yes, I've had several occasions where I shared my thoughts with him.
Thank you for that. I yield. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Camacho. I hereby recognize Representative Ed Probst.
Thank you. If I may continue with a few more questions I have, Madam Chair. Lieutenant Governor, in the past few years, the people of the Commonwealth have faced several super typhoons, and now, of course, this pandemic. And of course, Governor Torres has taken much of the credit for the recovery from these disasters and for keeping COVID-19 under control and keeping us all safe. Recently, however, the AG, our Attorney General Edmund Busan, has determined that overtime payments that the governor authorized for cabinet members were in fact illegal. According to the Secretary of Finance, the amount of unauthorized overtime payments was to the tune of $8 billion, and the CNMI will never be reimbursed for that. Our congressional delegate, Congressman Kilili Sablan, has characterized the governor's spending of federal dollars as quote unquote reckless. Multi-million-dollar sole source contracts awarded during disaster emergencies to certain individuals or companies with strong ties to the governor have also come under scrutiny. In your opinion, has the governor's spending of disaster recovery and COVID-19 money, has it always been consistent with federal requirements? And has it always been in the public's best interest?
No. Let me explain.
Sure.
You know, in regards to the overtime payment, I also worked for over 20 years in the government, in the trenches, and as a division director in this legislature, as a secretary of the LNR. And I know I've had to go out there when I was making $25,000 as the director of Fish and Wildlife initially, that I wasn't eligible for overtime. That was the law then. And obviously, with the Attorney General's opinion, that is still the law today. I was surprised at that. I was in the Senate. And, unfortunately, we should have, governor should have seek real clarity and guidance from the Attorney General on that before authorizing that. Today we have folks that have been asked to return those money. And I can assure you that there's probably going to be a lot of legal cases in court of some of these individuals contesting that. Those people that served us after to help the community recover, there's no question they worked their butt off. We all know that. No leader in this Commonwealth should take credit, be in front of everybody taking credit for the success of their recovery. That belongs to all the hardworking employees of this government, nonprofit organization that help our community, and others, other volunteers, and other federal agencies. In regards to the COVID-19, and so I'm not surprised that the federal government decided not to reimburse us to the tune of $8 million. And obviously, the Secretary of Finance then said that that was going to be something that we're going to have to deal with. That contributed to our deficit, definitely. COVID-19, that credit, success of the credit, the success of that, of addressing the COVID-19 and keeping us safe, again belongs to CHCC and the COVID-19 task force. I've seen them work hard. Those folks up at the airport, the firemen that man the quarantine facilities day in and day out. The success of this is a joint success. Yeah, it is under his governor's tenure, and he's the governor and he's the leader. So to a large extent, or to some extent, we are given credit for that. But we also need to extend those credits and commendations to everybody, including yourselves. I know some of you members go out to the community to help in any way you can to keep us safe. The fact that Saipan and the Commonwealth is safe, more safer than a lot of our neighboring islands, is a testament to the community mindset and the cooperation that our community members have. It's not just one person or two person or one organization. Yes, we have a substantial amount of revenue that has been provided to us for COVID. We need to learn how to do these things. We can't just be signing contracts to do that without really sure in the early days of COVID. Those were emergency purchases. We're beyond the 90 days. I think we should make every effort to use procurement practices that would give the best deal to the Commonwealth and other opportunities to other small, medium, or big businesses in the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And I do want to add the fact that, as you had mentioned, those years that you were in various positions leading, you've also seen many typhoons, correct?
Yes.
You've seen, and as you have just stated earlier, so eloquently, that you didn't get paid overtime because it wasn't allowed. And the reason why we bring this up is because that was the standard practice.
Mhm.
Every governor previous to Governor Torres, most importantly, including the late Honorable Governor Eloy Enos, would not allow overtime. Former Governor Fitial, who was a stickler on this, told them, not only do you not get overtime, he cut hours, tremendous hours. Remember, I think we were reduced to 64 hours at one point, and there were complaints from his cabinet. And from what I had been told, he said basically in a meeting that if you don't like it, you can resign. But that was a reality that we dealt with because every governor before Governor Torres was aware of that. And what is, I guess, very difficult for many of us to understand is what made that change. The law didn't change. The law was consistent. And even based on your experience, you were aware of that. However, Governor Torres is the highest official in the land and made that determination. So moving forward, besides this illegal overtime, are you aware of any other disallowed costs pertaining to federal disaster recovery or COVID-19 assistance?
Yes.
Okay, and what other costs, what would those be?
COVID associated costs. I
Could you
believe,
elaborate?
and I don't want to speak to the governor's authorized representatives records or to Homeland Security. But I believe in the early days when we went and got this they call them NCS, non-congregate facilities for quarantine. Uh, we went in and took the hotels lock, stock, and barrel. And FEMA came back later, several months later, and says, "We're not going to pay you for all that. We're going to pay you for the rooms that you use, the actual number of rooms that were utilized." So that's one of them. I'm not sure what the other ones are, but I know that at this point in time, there are a substantial amount of disallowed costs that we still have to either renegotiate, figure out with the federal agencies, FEMA in this case.
Have you had any reason to question any of these sole source contracts or other expenditures? Let me hold up back on that question. Have you seen the different expenses pertaining to COVID, the many sole source contracts and vendor list? It's quite an extensive list. Have you seen that?
I've had the opportunity to see it.
Okay. Are you part of that decision making when it comes to awarding these sole source contracts?
No,
So you do not direct what companies get these? Who
No.
ultimately has the say in awarding these sole source?
it's the GAR,
Okay.
Um, the governor's authorized representative, and for COVID, and
And who does he report to?
governor, of
Thank you.
course, and the COVID-19 task force.
So ultimately, it is the governor.
Ultimately, yes.
It is the governor that makes the decision. And
Ultimately, the buck stops there.
exactly. As with many things, including reimbursements and so many other things. But getting back to this, I had the opportunity, and some of my colleagues have had to look through a list of all the different contracts and awarded up to August 30, 2021. And I want to ask you that based on the ones that you've seen, some of these contracts, have you had any reason to question any of these sole source contracts or any other expenditures from the list that you have seen? Any concerns that you may have had? Red
Oh.
flags?
There are certain contracts that are really high. I mean, that automatically kind of red flags it. So you take a look at it and find out what's that all about. At this point in time, I cannot give you any information to that, because the only person that could probably give you information would be GAR or the COVID-19 task force. And the Office of Public Assistance. They're the one that administer this program right now.
And thank you. There are several. If we were to really go through the entire list, we'd be here for another day. And so I don't want to do that. I know you have limited time, Lieutenant Governor. We appreciate the time you have here. I do want to just perhaps pick out just one out of the list, and I have several others to discuss with on a later date with the GAR or the governor or whoever. But one of them is have you heard of Royal Bix or Royal International Incorporated, doing business as Royal Supplies? Mr. Bix Sobti, I believe, is the owner.
Yeah, that's the company in Guam,
Yes.
if I'm not correct.
Do you know Mr. Bix Sobti?
I've met him a couple of times.
Okay. When the COVID hit, he was one of the companies that immediately benefited from some huge contracts. One of them, just on this list alone, and there could be more, was for more than $2.8 million in a contract, and this was sole sourced. But there were a lot of concerns with this, and I know that it is probably listed in the minority report and on different reports and some news organizations that have covered it. But they were able to do this without, it was an unsolicited bid. Somehow they came into the picture, and when they were last questioned, no one knew how Big Sopti got into the picture. And I'm bringing this up because this is one of many examples of somebody getting a sole source contract with really no one knowing how that came to be. And I say this because myself and a few of our colleagues met with some of the local vendors, and we understand the emergency of COVID, that they needed to supply so many masks and PPEs and everything. However, there were existing companies on island, local vendors, that were denied, that were not entertained, because these were sole source contracts. In fact, some of these local vendors were able to get contracts with federal agencies here, and when I went through some of their prices, were far, 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 far lower than what Big Sobti, aka doing business as Royal Bix and Royal International, was charging. And the craziest thing about all of this was, at the time when he was getting these contracts, he didn't even have there wasn't even a business license on record a local business license. Based on your experience, isn't having a local business license a requirement to do business here in the Commonwealth for wholesaling and other things like that?
I would think so.
Thank you. And we would too. And it's just one of the many mysteries where we've seen these sole source contracts that have really made the difference for some companies. And I believe that there must be not just a thorough audit, but each company needs to be looked at for some of these sole source contracts, including what they actually produced in terms of their actual deliverables. Again, we don't have all day to go through this, but that is just one small example of what we have been able to unravel. So based on that, do you think there are some serious legitimate concerns with regard to these sole source contracts?
Absolutely.
And
Uh,
thank you.
and-
Continue.
Yeah, and there are concerns. We should be concerned.
Do you-
Uh,
Do you think an audit would be appropriate for some of these?
yeah. You know, I'm probably the odd man out in the team. I don't even go to meetings for COVID anymore. But I tell you, this is my own observation and my opinion. The Commonwealth has had 4 major disasters. 4 in the past 5 years, 6 years. Sudalor, Mankit, U2, and now we're still dealing with this pandemic to the tunes of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not in the billions. Over the years, if you look at this kind of situation, the Inspector General, the federal government of FEMA would probably look at us. It would probably be a flag because we've had 4 major disasters that's um, basically funded for recovery by FEMA. Uh, should our own public auditor start looking at these issues? I think so. Personally, I believe we should. We should take a look at the practices. Um, and if nothing else comes out of it, at least we can fix what was broken.
Agreed, by the way. And I think we look no further than Puerto Rico and what has happened there with the indictments and arrests for corruption with federal scandals with money, with federal money. So, um, and one more question, Madam Chair. I know we're getting late in the day. I'm going to ask you a tough question, and I apologize for this, but I think it's an important question nonetheless. In your honest assessment of everything that you've seen on face value, all the things that we've seen thus far and continue to see, do you think that Governor Torres can be trusted to spend close to $1 billion in federal money in a responsible and honest fashion?
I don't think that's a fair question to ask me. Um, we continue to make mistakes, and we continue to not learn from it. I don't know. Maybe it's because we've had disasters right after disasters, and we don't have time to look back and figure out a better way. But we should. We really should. And if we don't have the capacity to fix it, then we should ask for help. We should ask for help.
Thank
You know, I cringe that when all this is done with, that the Commonwealth may be saddled with a lot of the costs and expenditures, and that would be a travesty, indeed. But let's hope that it doesn't turn out as bad as it could.
And I want to finish this point, Lieutenant Governor. Again, the buck stops on his desk, as you had mentioned with regard to Governor Torres. And you had just mentioned, that based on the mistakes we've made and everything, that we should ask for help. But the most frustrating thing is that so many of our people have been asking for help. And when it comes to many of them crying for help, I'll give you a perfect example, if I may, Madam Chair and colleagues, is when, with regard to PUA, with literally the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of PUA recipients who have not received their PUA yet, something that they should have by now, and it is still on hold. And there has been a few protests or gatherings with PUA. Absent, for sure, Governor Torres has never showed up once. And he speaks about feeling the pain of our people. I've shown up. A few of my colleagues have shown up. And if for those who haven't shown up, we have also talked with them afterwards, opened our offices. They've come and visited, or on the phone or through email and dialogue. The priorities, that we look at when we see some people get paid immediately, like Big Sabti, for example, getting paid in advance, getting paid right up front. And then we have the audacity to question because we are so concerned about fraud with regard to PUA. And even threatening some of them that you're breaking the law, and you could go to jail for fraud. These are our people, Lieutenant Governor. And that's the frustration that we have experienced in this body, is that we have a governor who always talks about working together, yet he won't even meet with us. He'll meet with a minority, he'll meet with certain people, but he's never once said, hey, Ed, come on over, let's meet. You have offered for us to come to your office and meet, and we have met. But unfortunately, Lieutenant Governor, the buck stops on his desk. And at the end of the day, he makes the final decision. So I just wanted to add that, and I apologize. And I'm going to wrap up my questions. Thank you very much for your time, for being so candid, and for being so forthright. It is so refreshing to have a leader who does that. It should be something that should be followed. I hope others follow in your footsteps, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
I recognize Representative Tina Sablan before we proceed.
Thank you. Just a few follow-up questions on Representative Probst's. But first, I wanted to just clarify for the record, Chair and colleagues, that the Exhibit 53 that was just submitted, the $1,800 dinner at Bourbon Steak, that was not, for the record, a restaurant on Saipan. It was a restaurant with Mr. Lewandowski in Washington, D.C. Okay. So moving on, Lieutenant Governor, you mentioned earlier that you don't go to COVID-19 meetings anymore, meetings of the COVID-19 task force. Could you explain why?
I believe the meeting venues have moved. Initially, I was going. But lately, I haven't. And I do share my thoughts to individual members of the COVID task force, to sometimes Warren, and I would pick up the phone to even Esther sometimes, even the governor. But sometimes the thing is just running. And sometimes I felt like Hey, maybe they don't need your brains or your thoughts on this matter because it's running and they don't. They gotta spend. They gotta do this. They gotta do that. Uh, but in every step of the way, you really in this situation, I really believe that our healthcare corporation have really stepped up. The protocols are there. Um, but I believe that the attorney general should be heavily in this task force. I know that the Department of Finance is. Uh, I'm not sure whether it would be appropriate for anybody from the public auditor to be there to provide guidance because we're talking about a substantial amount of resources. Granted that we're trying to keep safe, at the same time, we want to make sure that we do things the right way and within the legal bounds.
Thank you for that. But to go to the question, why you no longer attend these meetings, are you no longer notified or invited to these meetings, or are you choosing not to attend?
All of the above. All of the above.
Okay, thank you. And then going to the issue of disallowed costs with respect to the COVID-19 federal dollars, you mentioned that besides the illegal overtime for Super Typhoon U2, you are aware of disallowed costs for the quarantine facilities that COVID-19 funds are paying for. So which quarantine facility have these costs been disallowed for?
I believe it was the PIC
The
initially.
recent PIC?
No, the previous one. We used to have two,
Okay,
right? Remember,
Right.
we had PIC and we also had Kanoa.
right.
So when that decision came down from FEMA, we had to shift gear, I believe, and just have one, and then worked on the Marianas Resort
Mhm.
to really clean it up and get it up to standard. And so we used that as what they would call an overflow.
Right.
And because FEMA would only pay for rooms that are actually used, we would we ended up, I think, making the Marianas Resort the first choice until we've exhausted all the rooms. Then we start using the Kanoa so that we keep the expenditures down. But initially we had two 600 room quarantine facilities.
Right. But aren't we using PIC once again for quarantine?
Yes.
And has
That's
that
what I
been
heard.
disallowed by FEMA?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I
but
haven't been in discussions.
okay. But what you're saying is that FEMA would not pay for two hotel facilities to be used
Yeah.
as quarantines.
Yeah,
And so-
they'll pay for whatever rooms
Mhm.
are utilized,
Right. Okay.
and you know, uh, and they would have to project out based on arrival on the protocols that we're imposing right now.
Mhm.
I remember that we at one point when we were not getting COVID for even from travelers, we kind of relaxed the protocol so that you vaccinated, you test negative, you can do home quarantine and you get retested. Now, obviously, that has changed because of the spike that we're seeing, albeit um, uh, smaller than our neighboring island of Guam, but nevertheless, we keep seeing daily positive cases, and I think that's why the protocol was changed to 5 days mandatory quarantine, and that's perhaps why we sought out additional quarantine facilities with PIC.
Okay, but do you know the amount that has been disallowed so far?
I can't tell you that.
Okay. We would have to take that up with the GAR.
Yes.
Okay. And then besides the illegal overtime and the disallowed quarantine costs, are there any other disallowed costs that you're aware of associated with either disaster recovery or COVID-19?
Not, I'm not really aware of much. Like, I think the GAR for you two and the GAR for COVID would be the best people to get those information because they could give you as accurate as you can get, or even FEMA for that matter.
Mhm. Okay. And you mentioned that when the governor authorized overtime for cabinet officials um, after Super Typhoon U2, you were in the Senate at the time, and you were surprised by that, right? Because of your own experience and your understanding that they would not have been eligible under the
Yeah,
law.
you know, my first reaction was like, "Wow, did the law change?"
Mhm.
Because if the law changed, I wasn't aware.
Okay. So
So
since that time, it has also come to the attention of the legislature that with COVID-19, cabinet members and other appointed officials were authorized double compensation. So they were paid for their regular jobs as cabinet members and also for their COVID-19 duties for the same hours worked. Were you aware when that decision was made?
no,
Would you be concerned about it?
I would because there's a very good probability that we're just repeating the same mistake we made in you too. So yeah, I'm concerned. Something that needs to be looked at.
Thank you. And then just to wrap up, the questions regarding the millions of dollars in sole source contracts that have been awarded during these disaster emergencies. Do you believe that Governor Torres has exploited these disasters and the pandemic to personally enrich himself, his family members, his supporters, or other associates of his?
If you don't mind, I'd rather not answer that question.
Can you explain why you would rather not
Well,
answer that question?
I really don't want to speculate, and I'm hoping that that is not the case. But at the same time, there are issues in the whole practices that we need to be concerned about with sole source contracts here and there and there and there. Uh, but unfortunately, I do not want to pass judgment on that until we get more information. I don't really have a lot of detailed information onto these contracts and why they were executed in that way, in that manner. I just hope that, like I said, when all this is over and done with, that the Commonwealth and the community is not saddled with um, unreimbursable disallowed costs that we're going to be uh, looking at in the future.
You mean more disallowed costs than what we've already been saddled with?
Yes.
Thank you. I yield, Madam Chair.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to call for a short recess, 10 minutes. We've been in an oven all afternoon due to the mechanical issues here in the chamber. So short recess, 10 minutes. It is now 3:29. We will be back at exactly 3:39 and finish up for today. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We are back from recess. And prior to the recess, we were talking about whether the governor should be entrusted with $1 billion of federal money given his pattern to spend. And we will continue and move forward. We are almost done with today's hearing, and we just have a few more questions for the Lieutenant Governor. I also want to remind you that you are still under oath, and we will go ahead and go right into it. Lieutenant Governor, you have served in the legislature for 12 years. Earlier, you stated that you respect the legislative authority and as a co-equal branch of the government. You understand this legislative process as you were once in these shoes. And the role of this branch of government is to conduct oversight, specifically with this committee. Given your experience at the legislature, do you believe that there is sufficient reason and justification to call for the immediate resignation of Governor Torres or move for his impeachment based on his abuse of office and the flagrant waste of precious government resources?
I wish I could give you a short answer to that. But let me pivot and say it really is not my shoes right now to say yes or no. I would leave that to the members of this body to discern what has to be done.
Thank you.
Certainly, you guys have many different options on alternative, and I will leave that to you, to all of you folks, elected leaders of this body.
Of November 7th, 2019. Does that date ring a bell to you?
No,
No. You were arriving to your office when you happened upon the Federal Bureau of Investigation executing a search and seizure warrant on the office of the governor, and simultaneous raids were going on throughout the island, his personal home, his personal vehicle, or his vehicle, the law firm of his family. Was your office also a part of those raids?
no.
Can you share with us your opinion on the FBI investigation of the governor?
That was a sad day for the Commonwealth. As a government and as a community, that federal agency would come and search the office and affiliate offices of the governor and even his private residence. It took me 4 hours to recover from that shock. That's why it took me to 2 o'clock to be able to come out in the media and speak to the public about the event that occurred that day. Members of the community have shared their thoughts, how embarrassing it was. That day was an embarrassment for the Commonwealth. But, I also have a dim hope that things will work out. Things will work out for the governor and things will work out for this community. We're still dealing with that. Obviously, that dark cloud still lingers over the Commonwealth. That was a first, and it was a very, very rude awakening to the people of the Commonwealth. Uh, I was dismayed, almost embarrassed to face the public in the media, but I had to come out in the media and assure our people that, you know, the FBI was an arm of our federal government, and that they also are entitled to make these investigations based on informations probably that they have or have been shared with them, and we should allow them to do their work. Again, I hope for the sake of the Commonwealth that uh, we come to a closure on that particular issue, uh, and I hope that the governor will come out of uh, this situation uh, without any criminal charges brought upon him.
Thank you. Would you say that as a result of those raids, there has been an erosion of public trust, an erosion of our democracy or our ideals related to our democracy, erosion of public trust in this administration as a result of the FBI raids?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, and my final question, is there anything else you believe this body should know or anything you would like to clarify before we close the hearing?
Thank you. As far as anything else for me to share, any information? No, I don't. My thoughts? I wish to thank you for this opportunity. And I refer back to my statement when we started this hearing this morning. And I come before you with much hesitancy because the matter that we're looking into or that you're looking into um, borders on misdeeds, misappropriation of fund, waste, abuses, allegations of criminalities. And that's not a very pleasant issue to discuss, particularly if you're a lieutenant governor. And the governor is the one under investigation. I want to thank you for the civility that you folks have expressed in the line of questioning on issues that perhaps some are very sensitive. And if I don't answer as openly as I should have, I apologize for that. Uh, but this is the only way, really. I really believe that the oversight authority of these bodies in good governance. There are people out there that may disagree with me. Why am I sitting here entertaining the questions of this committee when I am the lieutenant governor and the investigations that you guys are conducting are on the governor? That's a very good question. Why am I sitting here? Why am I answering to these allegations? At the end of the day, the governor has to be the one that answers all these questions. I cannot answer your questions about how come he uses 235,000 gallons of water at his residence. I can tell you that that's extraordinarily unusual for a resident, even of 10 people, to be using that much water. And you have a right to know. I can't tell you why he decided to work with MBA in the midst of a close down because of the global pandemic and decide that they're going to go up north and use Mr. Harrington's um, ability for hunting and fishing to expose the frontiers of the Commonwealth. Only he can answer those questions, really, in any clarity. I can't answer your question why he paid $281 for black micro dinner. I can't. Are those unusual? Yes. There would be people out there today and tomorrow and Friday that would say I threw the governor under the bus. There will be people that say I spilled the beans. But I didn't spill the beans on anybody. You guys are intelligent enough, and that you guys have the beans in your offices in boxes of informations that you have acquired through Open Government Act from our Department of Finance. The beans are there. I didn't bring it. It was there. It's public records. And you have a right to discern that and look into the matter whether there is one, fraud, abuses, waste, at the very least. I already looked at some social media and LT's throwing the governor under the bus. You know what? I didn't throw him under the bus. He ran in front of the bus. And in order for him to come out of this unscathed or minimize the damage to his reputation, he has to be the one to come before this body and clarify the questions that you have. And I hope that he does. I really do. And he's made that statement that he has nothing to hide, and that he will answer to this body at the appropriate time, whenever that is. But I hope he does. The buck stops there. Did I make mistakes in approving some of his first class travel? I shouldn't have signed them. Yeah. I should have been more specific and say, and I have a little bit. Maybe I should have done that a little bit more forcefully and said, no, I'm not going to sign this. At the end of the day, those funds that are used for the governor's travel are his discretionary fund or operations fund that was funded, appropriated for his office. And only he is the expenditure authority to those funds. What I'm saying is that even if I'd signed that or I didn't sign those TAs, I can assure you those travel would have occurred. Period. If I'm going to travel, and I don't know why we have that process, I really don't. Because at the end of the day, I'm responsible, and he is responsible for his discretionary fund. Every individual member of this legislature is wholly responsible for their discretionary fund. It's not going to be the Speaker of the House. It's not going to be the chairman of JGO or chairman of Ways and Means. Every individual member. And I don't think that if Ed wants to go to Guam on an official business, that he has to go and ask Edwin. At the end of the day, you're wholly responsible for those discretionary funds. And we're held to that individually. Uh, you know, I've watched some of the proceedings of this hearing over the past month. And there were times when it was very painful. Very painful. We have translators, we have legal counsels that were jockeying here and there. But at the end of the day, look, those folks, those employees in the government, whether they work at finance, whether they're PSDs, whether they're police officers at boating safeties, should have never been put in that situation. Never. Some of these people had training. Some of these people were certified accountants. Some of these people have worked for this government, worked hard for this government for 30, 40 years. We should have never subjected those people to that. I cannot clear him. I cannot answer yes or no whether he's abused it. I have my own personal opinion. Red flags have gone up, but I sincerely hope that in light of what has come out and what has, you have discovered that he can explain those. Why did he travel first class? I don't know. Maybe it's more comfortable for him. Only he can answer that. And you're right, Congressman Camacho. I voted for that legislation because at the time there was a lot of abuses in government travels. And we saw it in the legislature, and we thought at that time that it was time to nip it. It was, by the way, a legislation that was passed, I believe, unanimously in the House, and it went on to the Senate. There's a lot to be learned. There's a lot to be done. And I hope that we continue to have the will, the fortitude to do what is right for our community. 10 months ago, 11 months ago, we furloughed people, 600 people. We furloughed. I felt the pain too. Not as much as the people that we furloughed, but it was painful. It was painful to make those decisions. Today seems to be back to normal and beyond. We need to stop using disasters as excuses to do the right thing. We really do. And maybe tomorrow, or maybe as soon as I walk out this door, I will probably be the most unpopular individual in this administration. But you know what? I sat there since a month ago when the paper broke that this committee was going to bring subpoena me and the governor and several others. I sat there and I pondered about this. Should I get a lawyer? Should I get a translator? Should I just almost refuse? But you know, in closing, I'm glad I came. I'm glad I came, and I want to thank you for this opportunity, because I can walk out there today and I can say that I answered your query and your questions to the best of my ability in a honest, open manner as I can. And tonight I'm going to sleep well. Last night I wasn't sleeping well because I didn't know what you guys were going to ask me. But thank you, Chair, for your civility. Members, you have a lot of work ahead of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And before we excuse you for the day, I want to extend to you the same gratitude of respect that you have shown to every member of this committee. And, respect goes both ways. And I'm glad, as I mentioned to you at the start of this hearing this morning, perhaps maybe the other witnesses that will be summoned before this committee can learn from your example that we conduct respectful proceedings. Witnesses are not the focus of our investigation, as you have seen in the line of questioning from each member. And that when it comes down to it, you have led by example, and that honesty is truly still the best policy. Ni uno gizahita kumakadga bastun sanguse finumanamku. No one is perfect. We all make mistakes. And it is important, in order to bring back trust in our government, that honesty be exercised. You know, if you own up to your mistakes and apologize to the people, the damage really, as you mentioned, could be somewhat controlled. And that this dark cloud, as you have mentioned, hanging over our Commonwealth will somehow dissipate to a certain extent. This committee and members of this committee have been accused of being racist, of violating constitutional rights of our citizens. We have been personally attacked, but no one has ever disputed the evidence we have presented thus far. And that is because they can't. These are, as you mentioned, public documents that are available to anybody. And we want to thank you for being with us this whole afternoon. And if there are any other members who would like to make any further comments, they're welcome to do so. I recognize Representative Vicente Camacho.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you. Thank you for being a statesman and for practicing good governance. Thank you for allowing the people to hear your views in today's hearing. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Camacho. Anybody else? Representative Ed Probst.
Just for clarification, Lieutenant Governor, you mentioned that walking out of here, you may be the least popular person in this administration, but I can assure you that you will walk out of here with your head held up high because you spoke the truth, because you were forthright, forthcoming, and you exemplified what it is to be a statesman. I think that will resonate well in all of all of the people that you serve. You have been a public servant and you continue to be one, and you lead by example, sir. So I salute you. I thank you for being so candid and forthcoming and um, giving us this opportunity without any headache or hassle. I can't tell you how refreshing it is to hold a hearing and not go through so much frustration and animosity, because at the end of the day, we shouldn't be adversarial. Um, we're here to investigate the governor and his and it and you as a witness showing, you know, how to hold oneself is something that I believe everyone should follow. And again, sir, Lieutenant Governor, thank you very much for your day, for spending the day with us in this hot day. Viewers don't know how hot it is. It's about 90 some degrees in here, and we're not sweating because any of us is nervous. We're just hot. So, Lieutenant Governor, thank you once again, sir.
Thank you, Representative Probst. Anybody else? If not, Lieutenant Governor, once again, thank you. Don't clone us as small seat. And I thank you for your service and for always keeping our community and members of our community in your heart and in your mind. And you are hereby excused.
Thank you.
Short recess, 5 minutes. Thank you. Lieutenant Governor Arnold Palacios is hereby excused from the hearings for today. And so now we would like to recap what has transpired and what we have been able to confirm through the testimony of the Lieutenant Governor. With over 32 years of government experience, the Lieutenant Governor is more than qualified to render a professional opinion and gauge the conduct of Governor Torres. And based on his extensive experience, these reimbursements to Governor Torres on taxpayers' dime are, according to his words, amazing. On its face, he doesn't see that these first-class travels by Governor Torres and Mrs. Diane Tudela Torres as legitimate government expenses, and that even though he has raised his concern to Governor Torres regarding first-class travel, he was told by Governor Torres that it is okay, contrary to what the law says. As to the excessive use of government resources such as boating safety boats and DPS personnel for fishing excursions, family recreational trips to Tinian, Rhoda, Guam, Managaha, and the Northern Islands, according to Lieutenant Governor, they are overkill. The Lieutenant Governor sees these as jeopardizing the grants, and in doing so, Governor Torres is putting the education of our youth and safety of our community at risk. These programs are meant to educate and pass on life skills such as fishing for our youth and to keep our public safe. The legislature is constantly being pushed and pressured to create revenue-generating bills, according to Governor Torres. But by decreasing fraudulent government spending, we can make a positive impact on our government finances. If we stop the waste, there would be more for our people without taxing them during these difficult times. Can we as a government continue or afford to continue and violating these federal grants and agreements that we have been privileged to partake of? If it weren't for the hard work of Congressman Kilili Sablan's efforts in Washington, D.C., where would we be without federal dollars? Is a question that we need to start asking ourselves. I just want to note for the record, excuse me, that we will adjourn today's meeting. And I wanted to let the public know that the pace of the witnesses to come before this committee will be at a slower pace because the House as a whole voted to reject the Senate's version of the government's budget. One of the contentious issues in that version is the clause that gives hefty pay raises to cabinet members. And we believe that during this continuing recovery of the pandemic and Super Typhoon Yutu, that we should share the burden of a depressed economy, and that we should share this time of physical recession with our community. But I wanted to state for the viewing public that we will come back next week, Tuesday, September 21st at 10:30 a.m. to receive the testimony of CUC Executive Director Gary Camacho. Are there any other comments from the members? I recognize Representative Tina Sablan.
Thank you, Chair. I do like yourself, Madam Chair, and like our colleagues, deeply appreciate Lieutenant Governor Palacios's candor, the fact that he showed up and was willing to answer our questions as truthfully and as forthrightly as he could, to the best of his ability. I think that was, his credibility and his honesty came through loud and clear, at least for me. I do appreciate that he didn't come with counsel, though he could have. And there wouldn't have been anything wrong with that. He would have been entitled to it, as all of our other witnesses have been. But he recognized and stated in his opening remarks to us that he didn't feel the need to come with counsel. He recognized, as we have repeatedly stated, that he is not the target of this body's investigation. None of our witnesses are the targets of this investigation. And, you know, I do want to also express my appreciation and recognition of the difficult position that he was in today, in testifying as a witness in an investigation of the governor when he is the lieutenant governor. So, you know, to go to his comment, right? Like one of my takeaways is as he said, at the end of the day, the buck stops with Governor Torres. He is the expenditure authority for the funds allocated to his office. He is responsible for directing the use of government resources, whether it was for first-class travel for himself and his wife, whether it was for boating excursions using government vessels and government personnel, whether it was reimbursing himself from taxpayer dollars for a whole slew of lavish expenditures, or for his own excessive utility usage. Not to mention, and I'm glad that we got to this today, some of these multi-million-dollar, very questionable sole source contracts that have been awarded under the governor's watch during these multiple disaster emergencies. So I think part of the value that I see in the lieutenant governor's testimony is that he helped shed light on many of our questions, and place some of these public expenditures of the governor in context, particularly in contrasting the governor's expenses with his own. You know, I think some of that contrast is frankly shocking. You know, and clearly, you know, that there's a very striking difference between the fiscal decisions that the lieutenant governor has made as, you know, one of the highest chief executive officials in our government, compared to Governor Torres's very lengthy record of extravagance. So anyway, in closing, I think he's right. Only the governor can answer at the end of the day and clarify fully our questions, and the questions of our citizens about how public funds have been spent during his tenure. Thank you. I yield.
Any other members? Recognize Representative Donald Miglonia.
Thank you, Chair. And just a brief statement. You know, today was really a breath of fresh air. We were able to get a lot of the questions answered in a way that doesn't leave the people guessing or questioning a lot of these things. You know, Lieutenant Governor has almost the same benefits as the governor in regards to utilities, in regards to discretionary accounts. But we can see that with the Lieutenant Governor's actions and understanding these regulations and laws that are in place, that, you know, these are the people's money and these should be spent wisely. And, you know, to spend it extravagantly, it goes to show that, you know, there's a disregard for the way public monies are spent. And so moving forward, I hope that this will, you know, give the next set of witnesses the opportunity to shed some light so that people are aware of some of the inconsistencies or discrepancies that we see in a lot of the works that were given to the committee. You know, the Lieutenant Governor said one people that were calling in should never have been placed in this situation, you know, but, you know, we are not investigating them. We are here to get answers for the people. And the Lieutenant Governor kept saying over again, you know, there's this dark cloud over the CNMI. And I hope that this committee can, you know, shed some light and bring some hope to the people of the CNMI, And with that, with the budget coming up, I appreciate the chair's consideration. And just for the public's information, Friday will be our first meeting with the Senate as a conference committee. We will be going over the amendments that the Senate had made to the House's version. And so it is our hope that we can get it all done by Friday. If not, we will try to work throughout the weekend so we can pass the budget as early as possible to give the governor enough time to review the changes that we've made and address some of the concerns that he feels that that we didn't do our part, I guess, in putting this final product together. And so I appreciate the committee's consideration, and we will update the committee members on the outcome of our conference committee meeting on Friday. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Maglonia. To add to that, I wanted to let the viewing public know that we are trying our best to avoid a shutdown. And that is why that's part of the reason why this JGO committee hearings will be at a slower pace for the next couple of weeks until both houses of the legislature can come to an agreement with regard to the budget. And if there are no other members who would like to make comments, can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting? A motion has been made and has been seconded. Are there any discussions on the motion? If there are none, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This meeting is hereby adjourned. It is now 4:22 p.m.